The grand stellar amphitheater of the High Synod was not designed for silence, yet silence was the only tyrant that ruled it now. The architecture itself was a testament to the dominance of the Galactic Concordat, a soaring, vaulted dome of translucent crystalline alloy that looked out into the cold, uncaring void of deep space, suspended within the gravitational shadow of a neutron star that served as the Council's anchor. Usually this hall thrummed with the cacophony of 1,000 species, the air thick with pheromonal signals, the hum of translation matrices, and the shifting of light spectrum displays representing the collective will of the galaxy. But today, the silence was absolute, heavy, and suffocating. It pressed against the chitinous plates of High Exarch Cael'thas, the supreme commander of the combined naval forces, as he stood before the panoramic viewing wall. His compound eyes, capable of perceiving the ultraviolet spectrum of fear that radiated from his subordinates, remained fixed on the tactical display that dominated the room. Out there beyond the reinforced glass and the energy shields lay the Sol system, or rather what was left of it in the eyes of the galaxy. It was no longer a star system, it was a cage. The blockade was the largest military undertaking in the 10,000-year history of the Concordat. It was a sphere of steel and energy, a tessellation of warp platforms, interdictor cruisers, and graviton anchor stations that completely enveloped the borders of human space. There were no gaps. There was no way in, and more importantly, there was no way out. The scale of the containment was difficult for even the Exarch to comprehend, despite having ordered its construction. It was a wall built across the heavens, a blockade so dense that it blotted out the light of the Sol star from the rest of the galaxy. The humans had been designated a Class X existential threat, a species that evolved too fast, consumed too voraciously, and adapted with a frightening, predatory speed that terrified the ancient, slow-moving empires of the Concordat. Exarch, a voice broke the stillness, soft and trembling. It was Subminister Vren, a creature of soft tissues and aquatic heritage, floating in a suspension tank to Cael'thas' right. The sensors report nothing. Again, it has been 3 standard cycles since the Great Seal was completed. No transmission, no thermal bloom from their engines, no attempt to breach the perimeter. Cael'thas did not turn. His mandibles clicked together in a slow, rhythmic expression of unease. They are waiting, Vren. That is what predators do. They wait for the prey to blink. They wait for a gap in the fence. They are testing our resolve. But the silence, Exarch, Vren insisted, his translation collar buzzing with the nuance of his anxiety. It is unnatural. When we blockaded the hive mind of Zexus, they threw themselves against our shields until their biomass was spent. When we contained the cyber collectives of the Outer Rim, they flooded the spectrum with logic bombs and pleas for negotiation. Humanity does neither. They have simply stopped. The darkness behind the blockade is absolute. Cael'thas looked at the tactical map. The red sphere of the blockade surrounded the yellow dot of the sun. Inside that red sphere, the sensors showed nothing but static. The Concordat had deployed the full might of the galaxy to imprison one species on their home world, to keep them from spreading their chaotic, rapid-fire innovation to the stable, orderly worlds of the interior. The humans had expanded to 3 systems in less than a century. The Concordat took 1,000 years to settle one. The disparity was terrifying. If the humans were not stopped, they would consume everything. That was the logic, that was the mandate. Maintain the perimeter, Cael'thas ordered, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. Increase sensor gain on the subspace frequencies. If they try to tunnel out, I want to know before they even breach the crust of reality. If they try to use hyper lanes, the interdictors will collapse the tunnels on top of them. We have them trapped. It is simple physics. We have more mass, more energy, and more ships than they have atoms in their fleet. But as he said the words, Cael'thas felt a hollow pit in his primary stomach. The humans were illogical. They were emotional, erratic, and dangerously inventive. During the border skirmishes, when the Concordat first tried to limit their expansion, the humans had weaponized an asteroid mining rig, turning a tool of industry into a kinetic bombardment platform in mere hours. They did not think like the ancient races. They did not respect the sanctity of tradition or the slow, methodical pace of galactic development. They were children playing with fire, and the Concordat had decided to take the matches away before the house burned down. Hours stretched into cycles. The tension in the war room became a physical presence. Commanders from a dozen species sat at their stations, watching screens that refused to change. The blockade remained perfect. The Sol system remained silent. It was as if the humans had simply accepted their imprisonment, accepted that they would never leave their cradle again. But Cael'thas knew better. He had studied their history. Humans did not accept cages. They broke them or they died trying. Then the anomaly appeared. It did not appear at the blockade line. It did not appear in the buffer zone where the minefields lay thick as stardust. It appeared inside the war room. A ripple of distortion moved through the center of the great hall, a shimmering of the air that smelled of ozone and impossible mathematics. The guards at the perimeter leveled their energy lances instantly, their training taking over where their minds faltered. Kael'thas spun around, his carapace bristling with defensive instinct. The distortion did not behave like a teleportation beam. There was no energy spike, no ionization. It was as if the space itself was folding, peeling back layers of reality to reveal something that had been walking beneath the floorboards of the universe. From the distortion, a figure stepped out. It was not a soldier in power armor. It was not a warrior covered in weapons. It was a human male of average height, wearing a simple, tailored suit of dark gray fabric. He held a datapad in one hand and looked around the vast, terrifying majesty of the High Synod with an expression that could only be described as mildly apologetic. "Hold fire," Kael'thas roared, his voice booming over the panic that was beginning to erupt among the delegates. "Hold fire." The Exarch knew that if they fired now, inside the command center, the backlash would destabilize the station's core. But more than that, his curiosity warred with his fear. How? How had a human walked through the most impenetrable shielding ever devised, past a blockade of millions of warships, and into the heart of the enemy's command without triggering a single alarm? The human adjusted his cuffs and looked up at the towering form of the Exarch. The size difference was comical. Kael'thas stood nearly 3 meters tall, a hulking mass of bioarmor and muscle, but the human did not flinch. "High Exarch Kael'thas," the human said, his voice amplified by a small device on his collar, speaking perfect, high-dialect Galactic common. "I apologize for the intrusion. We tried to hail you, but your interdiction field is remarkably effective. It blocks all transmission frequencies, quite a marvel of engineering, really. We spent a good afternoon admiring the energy density readings." Kael'thas stepped down from the dais, his heavy footsteps shaking the floor. "You are a prisoner," he hissed, the translation matrix struggling to convey the depth of his menace. "Your system is sealed. Your species is contained. How are you here? Is this a hologram, a projection?" "I assure you I am quite real," the human said, tapping his chest. "My name is Ambassador Reeves, and I'm here because we noticed you've gone to a great deal of trouble to park a very large amount of hardware on our front lawn. We thought it would be polite to come and ask why before we continued with our other arrangements." "Other arrangements?" Sub-Minister Vren gurgled from his tank, his tentacles twitching. "You have no arrangements. You are trapped. We have blocked the hyper lanes. We have blocked real space. We have blocked the warp transit vectors. There is nowhere for you to go." Reeves looked at the aquatic diplomat with a look of genuine confusion, then his expression softened into something that looked pitying. "Oh," he said softly. "Oh, I see. You think we travel through the top layer." The silence that followed was louder than the initial shock of his arrival. Kael'thas narrowed his eyes. "Explain, and choose your words carefully, human. You are one biological entity surrounded by the might of the Concordat. I can have you vaporized in a microsecond." "You could," Reeves agreed, walking calmly toward the center of the room, ignoring the weapons pointed at him. "But that wouldn't change the fact that the blockade you've built is, well, it's obsolete. It's a very impressive wall, Exarch, truly, but you built it in 3 dimensions, and you anchored it in the 4th dimension of time. That's very standard, very reliable." He pressed a button on his datapad, and a holographic projection sprang to life in the air between them. It showed the galaxy, a swirling spiral of light. It showed the Concordat's territory, vast and sprawling, and it showed the blockade around Sol, a tiny, impenetrable sphere. "You see," Reeves continued, his tone like a professor lecturing a slow class, "when we realized you were afraid of us, we were confused. We didn't want war, we just wanted to explore. But when the blockade fleet arrived, we realized you weren't just afraid, you were terrified. You wanted to stop us from Mav. Ing out, you wanted to box us in." "We have succeeded," Kael'thas growled. "You are boxed in." "In the spatial dimensions, yes," Reeves nodded. "But humanity has never been good at sitting still. When we saw the wall, we didn't try to break it. That would be rude and it would cost lives, yours and ours. We didn't want a war, so we looked for a way around, or more accurately, a way under." The hologram shifted. The flat plane of the galactic disk seemed to gain depth, not in space but in texture. Layers peeled away, revealing a dark, swirling undercurrent beneath the stars. "We call it the substrata," Reeves said. "It's not hyperspace, it's not warp, it's the basement of the universe. The plumbing, if you will, the physics down there are slippery, chaotic. Most species avoid it because the math is terrifying. It drives navigational AIs insane. But we found that human intuition, our chaotic, erratic nature that you fear so much, is actually the perfect guidance system for the substrata. We don't calculate the path, we feel it." Kael'thas felt a chill run through his blood. This is theoretical nonsense. The abyssal planes are uninhabitable. No ship can survive the pressure of non-reality. "Conventional ships can't," Reeves corrected. "But we didn't use conventional ships. We adapted. We built hulls that flex with the reality shifts. And while you were busy building this magnificent wall around our house, we dug a tunnel out the back." The hologram zoomed out. It showed the Sol system, surrounded by the red sphere of the blockade. But then it showed blue lines, hundreds of them, erupting from Sol, diving down into the darkness, bypassing the blockade entirely and re-emerging everywhere. Kael'thas staggered back. The map showed blue dots appearing all over the galaxy, in the uncharted zones, in the dead sectors, even inside the borders of the Concordat itself, in systems that were thought to be barren or useless. "We've been busy," Reeves said, his voice dropping to a solemn register. "While you sat here for 6 months maintaining the blockade, we've established 12 colonies. We've built 3 trade hubs. We've explored sectors you gave up on 1,000 years ago. We didn't break your blockade, Exarch. We rendered it irrelevant." The gathered delegates erupted into chaos. Shouts, screeches, and terrified murmurs filled the hall. The idea that the humans had been moving freely, silently, beneath their very feet, beneath the fabric of their reality, was a nightmare scenario. They were not contained. They were everywhere. "Silence!" Kael'thas roared, slamming his fist onto the tactical table, cracking the composite surface. The room fell quiet again, trembling under his rage. He turned his burning gaze on Reeves. "You admit this. You admit to violating the sovereign territory of the Concordat. You admit to infiltration. This is an act of war. We will collapse your tunnels. We will bombard your worlds." Reeves did not flinch. He did not look afraid. Instead, a profound sadness crossed his face. He deactivated the hologram and placed the datapad on the table. "We didn't do it to invade you, Exarch," Reeves said quietly. "We didn't establish those colonies to take your resources. We didn't come here today to gloat." "Then why?" Vren asked, his voice shaking. "If you have this power, this ability to walk through the walls of the universe, why come here? Why reveal it? You could have struck us from the shadows. You could have destroyed the blockade fleet from the inside." "Because of what we found," Reeves said, and for the first time the human looked tired. He looked old. The weight of a terrible knowledge sat on his shoulders. "When we went into the substrata, when we went deep into the basement of the universe to escape your blockade, we heard something." The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. The political anger evaporated, replaced by a primal, instinctual dread. There was something in Reeves's tone, a resonance of truth that transcended species barriers. "What did you hear?" Kael'thas asked, his voice low. "We found out why the galaxy is so quiet," Reeves said. "We found out why the ancient precursor races vanished. We found out why you, the Concordat, are so obsessed with stability and walls. You feel it too, don't you? Subconsciously. You build walls because you're afraid of the dark, but you've been building walls in the wrong direction." Reeves tapped the console and a new image appeared. It was not a map. It was a waveform, a sound converted to light. It was jagged, ugly, and repeating. "The signal is coming from outside the galactic rim," Reeves explained. "It's approaching, fast. We calculated the trajectory. It's not a natural phenomenon. It's a sweep, a harvest. It comes every 50,000 years, wiping the slate clean, and it's due to arrive in less than a decade." The Exarch stared at the waveform. He recognized the pattern. It was a theoretical anomaly that Concordat scientists dismissed as background radiation. But seeing it now, contextualized by the human's data, the pattern was undeniable. It was a hunger. "We didn't escape your blockade to conquer the galaxy," Reeves said, looking around the room, meeting the eyes of every terrified diplomat. "We escaped to save it. We've been using the substrata to move resources to the rim. We've been building, not colonies for living, but fortresses. We've been building a shield, not a wall to keep people in, but a shield to keep the darkness out." Kael'thas felt his world fracturing. The humans, the upstarts, the chaotic children, had not only outsmarted the ancient empires, but they had also taken on a burden that the Concordat had been too blind to see. While the Concordat pointed its guns at Earth, Earth had pointed its shield at the void. You are fighting it?" Kael'thas asked, his arrogance shattering. "Alone." "We were," Reeves said. "We realized that your blockade, while annoying, was actually a blessing. It kept you safe. It kept you focused here while we did the dirty work out in the deep dark. But the signal changed yesterday. The swarm is accelerating. We can't hold the line alone anymore. We need ships. We need energy. We need the Concordat." The human extended a hand, a gesture of peace that seemed absurdly small against the backdrop of galactic annihilation. "The blockade must end," Reeves said firmly. "Not because we need to escape, but because you need to let us in. We have the technology to navigate the substrata. You have the firepower to hold the line. If we combine our fleets, your discipline and mass with our speed and adaptability, we might stand a chance." Kael'thas looked at the tactical screen. The red sphere of the blockade seemed foolish now, a child's fort built of sand while a tsunami approached. He looked at the human. He saw no deception. He saw only the grim resolve of a soldier who had seen the enemy and knew the odds. The Exarch made a decision that would change the course of history. He reached out and placed his massive, clawed hand over the human's small, soft one. "The blockade is lifted," Kael'thas announced, his voice booming through the comms channels, reaching every ship in the billion-ton armada. "All units stand down, realign deflector shields, prepare for data link with Terran command." He looked down at Reeves. "Show us the way, human, show us the substrata." Reeves nodded, a faint, tired smile touching his lips. "Buckle up, Exarch, it's going to be a bumpy ride." The transition from enemy to ally was not smooth, but necessity has a way of smoothing over diplomatic cracks. The weeks that followed the revelation in the High Synod were a blur of frantic activity that reshaped the political and military landscape of the galaxy. The Great Blockade, once a symbol of the Concordat's fear, dissolved. The massive interdictor cruisers, previously stationed to crush human attempts at flight, broke formation. They did not return to their home ports. Instead, they formed up on the flanks of Terran Pathfinder ships, sleek, ugly vessels that looked like they had been welded together from scrap and nightmares. These were the substrata divers, the ships that could slip beneath the skin of reality. To the aliens of the Concordat, the technology was nauseating. When a Terran ship activated its drive, it didn't accelerate, it fell. It dropped out of the visible spectrum, pulling reality down with it. To follow them, the Concordat engineers had to install phase harmonics anchors provided by the humans. It was a jury-rigged solution, a patch on the clean, elegant code of alien technology. But it worked. High Exarch Kael'thas found himself on the bridge of his flagship, the Sovereign of Eternity, a dreadnought 5 kilometers long. Beside his command throne stood Admiral Harlan, a human woman with gray hair cut aggressively short and a scar running down her cheek. She wore a utilitarian uniform that contrasted sharply with the ornate ceremonial armor of the Krell crew. "We are approaching the dive point," Harlan said, checking a holographic display that seemed to float in the air without a projector, another human innovation. "Your crew needs to be sedated, Exarch. The transition through the substrata, it doesn't agree with most neurologies. Humans are used to chaos. We evolved in it. You didn't." "My crew are the finest warriors in the galaxy," Kael'thas rumbled, offended. "We do not require sedation for a simple transit." Harlan shrugged. "Your call, but don't say I didn't warn you. The substrata isn't empty. It's where the universe keeps its bad dreams. If you stare too long into the visuals, you might see things that aren't there. Or worse, things that are." Kael'thas waved a dismissal, though a flicker of doubt pricked at him. "Proceed, Admiral." The fleet, a mix of the elegant, golden ships of the Concordat and the blocky, gray, industrial ships of Earth, approached the coordinate. There was no Stargate, there was no warp point, there was just empty space. Initiating phase drop in 3, 2, 1. The universe screamed. That was the only way Kael'thas could describe it. It wasn't a sound, it was a vibration in his very soul. The stars stretched not into lines but into spirals. The black of space turned a bruised, fleshy purple. The geometry of the bridge seemed to melt. Kael'thas gripped the arms of his throne, his mandibles locking tight. His tactical officers were screaming, clawing at their helmets. The navigation sensors were spinning wildly, reporting values that didn't exist. But the humans were calm. On the comm screens, Kael'thas saw the Terran crews moving with efficiency. They weren't looking at the viewports. They were looking at their instruments, their faces set in grim masks of concentration. They were surfing the chaos. Stabilizing, Harlan's voice cut through the madness, calm and anchored. Welcome to the basement, Exarch. Keep your hands inside the vehicle. Kael'thas forced his eyes open. The view outside was impossible. They were moving through a tunnel of swirling, coalescing energy. It looked like the inside of a storm cloud made of liquid mercury. And in the distance, through the walls of the tunnel, he could see shadows, enormous shapes moving in the deep. "What are those?" Kael'thas whispered, his pride forgotten. "Local wildlife," Harlan said dismissively. "Energy parasites. They feed on fear and leaky warp cores. Don't worry, we're moving too fast for them to latch on. We call this the slipstream. It cuts travel time across the galaxy from months to days. This is how we outmaneuvered you. While you were patrolling the surface, we were taking the subway." The metaphor was lost on Kael'thas, but the implication was clear. The humans had mastered a domain of physics that the Concordat had declared forbidden. They had embraced the danger, adapted to it, and turned it into a highway. "We are approaching the destination," Harlan announced after what felt like both an eternity and a second. "Preparing for resurface. This is going to be hard. We're punching up through the galactic rim." The exit was violent. The Sovereign of Eternity shuddered as if it had been struck by a planetary hammer. The purple fog tore apart, replaced by the stark, clean black of real space. The stars returned, steady and cold. "Status report," Kael'thas barked, his voice shaking slightly. "System stabilizing," a groggy sensor officer reported. "Shields are holding. We are at the galactic rim. Coordinates match the Terran data." "Look at the screen," Harlan said softly. Kael'thas looked, and he stopped breathing. They were at the edge of the galaxy, looking out into the intergalactic void. But it wasn't empty. Floating in the darkness was a structure. It was a ring, but a ring of such magnitude that it defied comprehension. It was not solid. It was a chain of stations, asteroids, and repurposed moons, linked by shimmering fields of energy. It stretched across a visual arc of nearly 100 degrees. It was a wall, a real wall. And beyond it, the darkness was moving. "By the Founders," Kael'thas whispered. "What is that?" "We call it the Aegis Line," Harlan said. "We've been building it for 50 years. Every resource we mined from the substrata, every colony we established, it was all for this. We stripped whole asteroid belts. We hollowed out moons." "And beyond it?" "The swarm," Harlan replied. The tactical view magnified the darkness. It wasn't empty space. It was a cloud of ships, creatures. It was impossible to tell. It was a mass of biomass and metal, billions of individual entities moving as a single fluid consciousness. They were blotting out the light of the distant galaxies. "They eat entropy," Harlan explained, her voice devoid of emotion. "They find organized systems, stars, civilizations, life, and they consume the energy until only cold dust remains. They are the great filter. They are why the galaxy is so empty." "And you intended to fight this?" Kael'thas asked, looking at the human woman with a new sense of awe. "With a few hundred ships and a wall of moons, you are insane." "We're human," Harlan corrected with a dry smile. "Same thing, but we knew we couldn't stop them forever. We just needed to hold them until we could wake the rest of you up. We needed the heavy guns. That's why we came to the Council." The comms channel crackled. "Admiral, this is Outpost 4. They are reacting to the arrival of the Concordat fleet. The swarm is surging. They sense the new energy source. They are accelerating." "Battle stations," Harlan ordered. "Exarch, deploy your fleet in a phalanx formation behind the Aegis line. Your interdictor fields, can you invert them?" Kael'thas blinked. "Invert them? They are designed to stop ships from entering hyperspace." "Exactly," Harlan said. "We don't want to stop them from leaving. We want to stop them from moving. NG, if you can project a mass shadow field over the swarm's vanguard, you can slow them down, make them heavy. Then our kinetic artillery can tear them apart." It was a brilliant, unorthodox tactic, using a containment tool as a weapon of mass deceleration. "It shall be done," Kael'thas said, the warrior in him awakening. The fear was gone, replaced by the clarity of purpose. This was not a police action. This was a war for survival. The humans had brought them to the ultimate battlefield. The battle that followed was not measured in hours, but in days. It was a grinding, brutal conflict of attrition. The swarm crashed against the Aegis line like a tidal wave of chitin and dark matter. The Terran defenses, huge railguns mounted on hollowed-out moons, fired slugs the size of skyscrapers, smashing through the biological tides. The Concordat fleet, initially hesitant, found their rhythm. The elegant energy beams of the Krell, the plasma torrents of the Zintari, and the gravity bombs of the Federation mixed with the raw, explosive violence of human kinetics. Kael'thas stood on his bridge, conducting the symphony of destruction. He watched as a tendril of the swarm tried to flank the line, only to be caught in a trap laid by the humans. A minefield hidden in the substrata that detonated from beneath the enemy, tearing a hole in reality that swallowed millions of the invaders. "They fight like demons," Vren, the aquatic diplomat, messaged from his science vessel. "The humans look at their telemetry. They are redirecting power from life support to weapons. They are ramming damaged ships into the enemy leviathans. They do not care about survival. They care about victory." "No," Kael'thas replied, watching a human cruiser interpose itself between a swarm projectile and a damaged Concordat carrier. "They care about us. They are protecting the pack. We are the pack now." The turning point came on the third day. The swarm, realizing the center would not hold, attempted to focus all its mass on a single point in the line, the command hub where Admiral Harlan was stationed. It was a suicidal charge, a spear of billions of entities aimed at the heart of the resistance. "They're breaking through Sector 7, Harlan's voice came over the comms, strained but calm. "Exarch, the line is buckling. We can't hold the physical integrity." "We are moving to intercept," Kael'thas roared, "but we are too slow." "Don't move," Harlan commanded. "Stay in position. We have a plan B." "What is plan B?" "We're going to open the drain." Kael'thas watched the tactical screen. The Terran command station, a massive structure built into a rogue planetoid, began to glow. But it wasn't the glow of shields. It was the blue, sickly glow of the substrata drive. "Admiral," Kael'thas shouted, "you cannot take a planetoid into the substrata. The mass is too great. You will shatter the local spacetime manifold." "That's the idea," Harlan yelled back. "We're not trying to travel. We're trying to crack the floor. All units brace for gravity shear." The planetoid did not jump. It sank. The humans activated thousands of substrata drives simultaneously, anchored to the fabric of space itself. They didn't move the station. They tore a hole in the universe right in front of the advancing swarm. A rift opened. It was a jagged, screaming wound in the cosmos, a whirlpool of raw dimensional chaos. The substrata, usually a pressurized layer beneath reality, vented upwards. The pressure differential was catastrophic. The swarm's vanguard, caught in the sudden gravitational undertow, was not destroyed. It was flushed. Millions of bioships were sucked into the chaotic, uninhabitable currents of the substrata, where the physics of the bad dreams would tear them apart atom by atom. The rift destabilized rapidly, threatening to consume the Aegis line itself. "Cut the drives," Kael'thas screamed. "Harlan, cut the drives." "We can't," Harlan's voice was breaking up. "The feedback loop, controls are fried. We have to manual disconnect. Tell Earth, tell them we held the line." The signal cut. Kael'thas watched in horror as the Terran command station was dragged toward the rift it had created. The swarm was being pulled in with it, the threat neutralized, but at the cost of the architects. "No," Kael'thas growled. He keyed the fleet-wide comms. "All ships, lock tractor beams on the Terran station. Maximum power." "Exarch, that is impossible," his navigation officer cried. "The drag is infinite. We will be pulled in." "We have more mass," Kael'thas bellowed. "We are the Concordat. We are the weight of the galaxy. Lock beams now." 1,000 ships, representing 1,000 worlds, turned their emitters toward the dying human station. Beams of green, blue, and gold light lashed out across the void, seizing the crumbling rock. The strain was immediate. The Sovereign of Eternity groaned, its structural frame screaming under the tension. Shields flared and died. Inertial dampen. Urs failed, throwing crew members across the decks. But the slide stopped. The combined mass of the Galactic fleet, anchored by the neutron star gravity engines of the Krell, held fast against the pull of the rift. It was a tug-of-war between the void and the united will of sentient life. "Pull," Kael'thas roared, his voice merging with the groaning metal of his ship. "Pull them back." Slowly, agonizingly, the Terran station was dragged away from the lip of the abyss. The rift, starved of its anchor, began to collapse, sealing itself with a thunderclap of silence that resonated in the minds of every telepath for 1,000 light years. The void calmed. The swarm was gone, scattered into the non-space of the substrata, broken and lost. The Aegis line was battered, burning, but intact. And the Terran station, scarred and silent, hung in the center of the Concordat fleet, cradled by the beams of its former jailers. The aftermath was not a celebration. It was a solemn realization. The delegates of the High Synod stood once again in the great chamber, but the atmosphere was different. The fear was gone. The arrogance was gone. Admiral Harlan stood next to Exarch Kael'thas. Her arm was in a sling, and she looked exhausted, but she was alive. The human delegation was no longer treated as a dangerous anomaly, but as the weary guardians of the gate. "The swarm will return," Harlan said, her voice echoing in the hall. "Maybe not for 1,000 years, maybe 10,000, but they are out there. The universe is a dark forest, and we just lit a fire." Kael'thas looked out at the stars. The blockade around Sol was gone. The tunnel network of the substrata was now open to all, mapped by human guides. The galaxy had become smaller, faster, and more dangerous, but also more united. "We blocked your borders," Kael'thas said slowly, his voice deep with reflection. "We thought we were containing a plague. We did not realize we were caging the guard dog." "We're not dogs," Harlan said, a small smile playing on her lips. "We're just neighbors, noisy, messy neighbors who like to renovate the basement. The Concordat owes humanity a debt that cannot be paid in credits or resources," the Exarch announced to the chamber. "You defied our laws to save our lives. You broke the physics of the universe to build a shield for those who despised you." "We didn't do it for praise," Reeves, the diplomat, spoke up from the side. "We did it because it was the logical thing to do. If the galaxy burns, Earth burns. We just happen to be good at fire safety." "The blockade is over," Kael'thas declared. "But a new wall must be built, not around Earth, but around us, around the galaxy. The Aegis line must be reinforced. The substrata must be fortified, and I believe," he looked down at the humans, "I believe the humans should lead the engineering corps." A ripple of agreement went through the hall. It was unprecedented. The youngest race leading the defense of the oldest. Harlan looked at the map of the galaxy. It wasn't a territory to be conquered anymore. It was a home to be defended. "We have plans," she said, her eyes gleaming with that terrifying, ambitious human spark. "Big plans. The Aegis line was just a prototype. If we're going to secure the galaxy, we need to think bigger. We need to tap into the galactic core. We need to weave the stars themselves into a network." Kael'thas felt a familiar twitch of anxiety. The humans were already escalating. They were already looking for the next impossible thing. But this time, he didn't feel the urge to stop them. He felt the urge to help them. "Then let us begin," Kael'thas said. "The fleet is at your disposal, Admiral. What are your orders?" Harlan grinned. "First, we're going to need a lot more coffee. Then we're going to figure out how to move a black hole." The High Synod, once a place of silence and fear, filled with the sound of work. The silence of the void was pushed back, not by walls, but by the roar of engines and the unity of 1,000,000,000 souls standing together against the dark. The humans had indeed had other plans. And now, those plans were the galaxy's hope. The blockade was a memory. The frontier was open. And humanity, the unbreakable, the uncontainable, led the way into the deep, dark unknown, carrying the torch that would never go out.